Hello guys, good afternoon. This is Gabriel Sanson, and this is SchellingTube. We are working with Schelling's Ideas for a Philosophy of Nature from 1797. It's volume 5 from the series 1 of Schelling's Historical Critical Edition. We have a translation in English. Let's see the author. I can't remember the translator's name. And now we are currently working with the introduction. It's translated by second Errol E. Harris and Peter Heath, with an introduction by Robert Stern. It's a good translation. Some sections are more complicated, but it's quite interesting. Overall, it's a very good translation. And what else? We are working now with the introduction. We already started the preface, the first edition, and now we are working with the introduction. It's from pages, I will work from pages 69 to around page 72 of the Historical Critical Edition of Schelling's works. So, Schelling criticizes the idea of a universal philosophy. He thinks philosophy is a work of freedom, and therefore it can only express individualities and not an universal idea. This would be a hindrance to freedom, according to Schelling. This finds echo in some of his echoes or resonances in some of his earlier works, such as the Philosophical Letters on Dogmatism and Criticism from 1795-1796, which he published anonymously in Needhammer's Philosophical Journal, and also the Anti-Critique. It's like a counter-critique, which is a response, a reply to a review on his work on the Ideias principle of philosophy. In both those works, Schelling criticizes the idea of a philosophy that submits itself to a theoretical system. If there is to be a system of philosophy, it must have as a guideline the practical dimension of philosophy. So those two texts from only a couple of years, 1 year before the Ideas from 1797, they already have this idea of a critique, a system, and things like that, on the limitations of a philosophical system. And this is interesting, especially if you consider Schelling's late periods of his philosophy and his idea of a positive philosophy, that is, a philosophy that has more room for individuality, for contingence, and that leaves aside all of those aspects of universality, things like that, system, etc. It is a strong critique in Hegel's philosophy, for example. Well, according to the Ideas, the philosophy of nature must be something that is not derived from a concept of a universal philosophy. It must be deduced based on principles. It must deduce the possibility of a nature, which means the possibility of the totality of the world of experience. And this is a main tenet in this introduction for the Ideas of a philosophy of nature, for a philosophy of nature. The next section of the introduction, the first section has no name. The second section comprises most of the introduction, which is very large. It's a very large introduction for the book. The work has 2 books and an introduction. It's as if it had 3 books, if you think about it, because the introduction is almost the size of the other 2 books. And it is very dense, a very rich text in terms of Schelling's ideas on teleology, organism, philosophy, epistemology, etc. Anyway, the next section is called About the Problems that a Philosophy of Nature has to Solve. So, remember, guys, that Schelling's intent in this text is not yet to elaborate, to develop system of philosophy, but he has a programmatic intent He wants to draw some ideas, to draw some plans for what must the philosophy of nature do. So Schelling affirms that for the ones who investigate nature and for the ones who enjoy the richness, it is not asked if nature is possible. Neither do they ask themselves if an experience is possible at all. By their action, they already presuppose that nature is real. And Schelling here refers to nature as a goddess in veil, probably here alluding to Isis, the mother nature. This also is found in Immanuel Kant's critique of teleological judgment, which is a part of the critique of judgment. In the Academy edition, it is 316 in a note in page 316. And I mentioning Kant because his critique of teleological judgment was very important in Schelling's philosophy of nature. More in a critical way, more as a counter point. Does that exist? I'm not sure, but anyway, as an adversary. Schelling sees Kant as an opposition here regarding philosophy of nature. Um, I mean the teleology. Kant's conception of matter is quite important to Schelling and his idea of unconditioned, but Kant's approach on purposiveness is severely criticized by Schelling. Well, according to Schelling, philosophy came to be with the question, how is a world outside us possible at all? And this question can also be thought of as, how is a nature possible and how is experience possible? Before those questions, man was one with nature that surrounded him. The biggest philosophers have always been the first ones to go back to nature, according to Schelling. And human being, by separating himself from the external world, begins the process of separation, trennung. And with this separation, speculation begins. To Schelling, speculation is not good because it separates object from its intuition, concept from its image. This originary separation leads to philosophy, to the act of doing philosophy, but to Schelling that is not that would not be the proper way. The proper way would be the resource to intellectual intuition, because speculation is discursive, whereas intellectual intuition is a non-discursive way of thinking, way of reaching knowledge, way of becoming one with the object of knowledge. And we will see more on how Schelling criticizes the idea of speculation and how he emphasizes the dimension of intuition in the next section.